Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Thursday edition of the MSP Initiative Live. It is January 27th. I almost can't believe it. Like, the first month of 2022 is behind us. Like, in a few days, it's going to be February. Wow. And the only reason that you don't think about this is probably because the NFL season has been expanded, right? So usually the first week of February is the Super Bowl, but in reality, it's like now a couple weeks behind. But anyway, that being said, we're gonna get to our guests for today in a quick second. I'm just gonna take care of some quick housekeeping, right? That we have to usually go through to make sure everybody's on the up and up on what's happening. So obviously, we've been putting out this stuff for a few weeks now, but just a reminder, especially if you're joining us for the first time, we will be at Zero Trust World the week of February 21st. Down in sunny Orlando, Florida. This is hosted by Threat Locker. At Zero Trust World, we will be holding a MSP community block party. So if you've joined us in the past, and I'm sure many of you have been to places like IT Nation and DattoCon, we do, these multi-vendor, co-sponsored, great networking type block parties. And so we're going to be doing another one at Zero Trust World. So number one, great event if you're trying to learn about cybersecurity. Great event if you're trying to network with your peers. We'd love to see you. Now, this session and every other session are in video and podcast format. You can find that under the sessions menu or in your favorite podcatcher. And you can rewind and, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of good information out of Zac today, so you're probably going to go back and do that. We'll be posting a new quarterly giveaway shortly with our participating MSP Initiative sponsors, so check back and make sure to jump in there. And lastly, we kind of broke the ice last week, or actually on Tuesday, we have announced 8 one-week Channel Strong tours throughout the rest of 2022. And that means we're going to be on the road, coming to a parking lot in your city, hopefully. And we want you to come out, learn a little, talk a little, grab a beer, grab a sandwich, and have a good time, right? That's all people from the IT MSP sandbox. And, nothing better than having to just drive down the street and put some good time in with everyone. So that is all of the housekeeping. I got it all done in 3 minutes. Not too bad. So today, for anyone that doesn't, if you were on a Channel Strong tour last year, you may have run into Zac. But I'm going to introduce Zac Paulson. Zac, I think, is in sunny Fargo. Is that right, Zac?
Yes.
Sunny Fargo. So if you're going to go see Zac, you don't want to wear shorts. I can promise you that. At least not outside. Zac, for everyone that may have not run into you in the past or understand your background or your history in MSP IT world, let's just take a quick trip down memory lane and kind of put the pieces together, and then we'll get into some of the current stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, George. Appreciate you letting me be here today. So as mentioned, Zac Paulson, Trueit. So we are in Fargo. It is 5 degrees right now. It is sunny, but it's 5 degrees. So it's not necessarily balmy by any means. But yeah, we have a MSP here based out of Fargo, North Dakota called Trueit. We started that MSP in 2012. And then kind of a little bit about our growth. We grew to about probably 25 people in 2017. Oh, there you go. He's ready. You can come to Fargo. You're ready to.
Every time I come, it's a snowstorm, man. Every time.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love visitors. We just want them to come in January and February so they get the full experience.
Oh yes.
Experience. So we started 2012. We grew till about 25 people. About $3 million in 2017, and then we acquired a Dynamics practice. So we entered the world of software consultants, and so excited to say that went on for about 3 more years till actually January 1st of 2022. We're excited that we launched that into its own company. We spun it off as True North Dynamics. So I'm a co-founder of True North Dynamics, and for any of you that have partnered with Trueit in the past regarding Dynamics deals, now you'll partner with True North Dynamics going forward. So that's a little history about Trueit and True North and what we do, and happy to answer any questions. So.
All right. Well, let's talk about your MSP for a second, because that's a success story, and we want to obviously acknowledge that. So you Is the so you're still operating the MSP, or is
Yep,
that
yep.
part of?
Still operating the MSP. Yep.
Okay, so and that's kind of gone in a couple of different ways, right? You just mentioned, hey, we started as an MSP, we acquired like a software development company, like that became a bigger thing, and then eventually like things matured into their own areas. How is it that you go from an IT company acquiring a software development company? Because that's
Yeah.
usually not normal, from a path standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, it was not in our strategy plan, none of that. But what had happened is, so Microsoft Great Plains kind of started in Fargo. It was called just Great Plains. It was actually run by who now is our governor. He launched that product. And then eventually, I think it was I think it was 2001, he sold it to Microsoft. And so now if people are familiar with the product GP, that came from Fargo, North Dakota. So what's interesting is this area is really concentrated for Dynamics consultants. You're going to find that there's probably more Dynamics consulting firms per capita in Fargo or the North Dakota region than you're going to find anywhere else across the country. And so because of that, we had a lot in Fargo, and a lot of them, like any software development or software consulting firm, IT is not their bag, right? They maybe have people that are somewhat technical, but they have a good share of people that aren't very technical and need a lot of computer help, just like every other organization. So we kind of found our niche working with these consulting companies. So at one point in time, because Azure was fairly new in 2017 in terms of IT companies getting into it and such, we were doing all the Azure and Azure support for about 4 different software consulting companies around Dynamics. And we were helping their companies move to Dynamic or move to Azure. And we were doing IT for some of them. And actually the one we acquired, we were their outsourced IT. So they called us for that IT service. And as IT companies, we sometimes know what's going on behind the scenes before the rest of the world does, right? So this company was in acquisition mode. They were in the process of being acquired. They were going to sell off a portion of their business. So we were working with them to help them separate that business. And as we were working through that, as we got to know them, as we were helping spin it off, then all of a sudden the purchase changed and they said, never mind, we're going to sell the whole company to this other company. And we're like, okay, sounds good. We'll still just keep working with you. We'll help you get that transition. It was an independent buyer, so they didn't really have a company. So they were going to inherit all the IT from us and all of that. And then lo and behold, the day the purchase was supposed to go through, it all fell apart. It all fell apart. And so this was pretty traumatic. Their company was relatively good size. They were about the same size as ours. They were about 26 people, large revenue line. They were $7 million. And it all fell apart. And they were an ESOP on top of that. So from that, there was, unfortunately, hats. You took the hat off.
I was just about to say, just for you, Keith. Keep going.
So when this sale fell apart, I felt really bad for the people. We've gotten to know them over the years. They were not only good clients, but many of them were friends. And so I called up their CEO and I just said, his name was Eric, and I just said, Eric, how can we help? Well, as we started talking, I'm like, we've been very blessed. We're in a good position as an MSP. What if we bought you? So it took about a year, and we negotiated the purchase of that company becoming part of Trueit.
Wow. So it's very intriguing because, I mean, right time, right place, Zac, right? I mean, that's the way of the world, or who sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, it's in talking with a lot of MSPs over the years, a lot of companies, you just never see that jump. You hear about MSPs acquiring other MSPs. You hear about software companies maybe coming down and acquiring MSPs, but usually not the other way around.
Right.
So how did those two sides coexist, or did they? Did you still operate them separately?
Well, that's a great question, because honestly, if I were to recommend any MSP look at acquisitions, I would recommend steer away from software consulting firms 100%. So here's some interesting things we've learned. Now, I love owning a software consulting firm, and I love the business, love the people, love the digital transformation we deliver. So I'm not saying we made a bad move, but what I am telling you is we learned a lot about an MSP and a software consulting firm coming together. And this is where I'd probably say, don't try this at home. So what happened was,
disclaimer, it's on the screen.
Yeah, it's a disclaimer. So what I would say is, you can't pick two more different business models. It would be like a trucking company and a pool maintenance company coming together. They're very, very different. And so we didn't know that getting into it. We made some assumptions that we could run them very similarly. We made some assumptions that, it's just another extension of a technology product. That's not true. MSPs, we're very much recurring revenue. We think everything month to month, we're cash basis. We pretty much money in, money out, and just keep everything moving. A software consulting firm is very different. They are much closer to some of their businesses, like a VAR, where there's really large capital expenditures, except it's usually service based. There's not a lot of money in the software, but actually of that $7 million, half of it was software revenue. Half of it was reselling Microsoft or ISVs. So that was interesting. Yeah, 50%. So that was hard to get used to because that model was changing. GP, when we bought the business, GP was very much an annual renewal. But now what everybody's seeing in the Dynamics world is that shifting to be a lot like Office 365. Now, Dynamics 365 is a monthly cloud consumption. Well, we had to live through that transition, and that transition was not easy. That was probably about, I'm just spitballing, but somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million shift in revenue from going to, large capital amounts to going to the monthly 365. Now, keeping in mind, we wanted it to become recurring revenue, but you've got to absorb that huge revenue hit, and that isn't always easy. The other thing is I would say the talent is very different than in an MSP. In an MSP, you have tiers of talent, right? In software consulting, this is all really high caliber consulting level positions, extremely talented and knowledgeable people. So the big challenge you run into is, one, payroll is your extremely largest expense. That is off the charts. But the other part is you got a lot of mouths to feed. So when you're selling lots of projects, you've got to keep a really steady pipeline. There's not that recurring revenue built in, and there's not really always a captive customer base that you have. So those are some of the big learning points that we figured out.
Wow, it really is different. I'm shocked by the 50% licensing Microsoft story. I mean, today, right? The big thing that we hear on all the forums, all the NCE is changing again, and Great Plains, Navision, Dynamics, right? These were largely considered their own lane at Microsoft, right? These were very specialized things. Microsoft is a CRM, right? Like it was very not something most MSPs would adopt, even internally, right? So very intriguing. The shift in Microsoft just putting everything down the same channel. Well, let me ask you this: I really other than bumping into you and your team, I never really heard the term Business Central come up until just chatting, right?
Yeah.
What is that, and why don't we know more about that? It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of promotion around it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's kind of why I would say MSPs and software consulting have really been, to use your words, which I think are great, is two different lanes. Like Microsoft has had this large software consulting group around the Dynamics products, whether it's ERP or CRM. They've had this for a long time, but as MSPs, we've stayed out of it completely. And so there's whole businesses that all they do is software consulting, and they don't even think twice about doing MSP. The two lanes just never crossed. Unfortunately, Microsoft just has never done a really good job of promoting those products. They've really relied on direct sales. They've relied on these direct channels, and the competition is so different, right? It's Salesforce, it's NetSuite, it's Intact, even QuickBooks Advanced. Those are the competition. HubSpot, those are the competition. So things that don't even cross our minds, right? We don't interact with them other than the fact that our customers have these things. So Business Central was kind of Microsoft's answer to replace GP, and also to bring that kind of software, one-time annual renewal, large implementation into the cloud era. For anybody that has, I think as MSPs, we probably all have a GP customer or two in our client base.
Somewhere.
And everybody knows it's a problem, right? Because it's on-premise. It's one of probably the last on-premise servers you got. It requires updates. If they do payroll, it requires annual updates and a lot of payroll work. and they need to do every 3 years at least upgrade a version because Microsoft is expiring old versions. Well, shoot, that is everything anti-MSP, right? By now, we've all evolved to where we're cloud focused, we're evergreen, we're getting off of premise onto the cloud. So Microsoft had to release a product that essentially replaced that GP, and even actually Navision. I don't know anything about SL and I don't know much about AX, but I do know that Microsoft was like, this is the one part of our business that does not fit this 365. And I think if you look at Microsoft stock price, that 365 model's worked out pretty well for them.
I mean,
So
like they've pretty much dumped it all down that path.
they have. And another little fun fact, Satya Nadella actually worked for Doug Burgum, who was our governor, who built Great Plains. So
Really?
yes. So he was on Doug's team, and Satya has a much deeper dynamics background that people are maybe aware of. So I have to imagine that in the halls of Microsoft, Satya is trying to figure out what moves we need to make to bring our accounting practices and our CRM practices into the cloud and into that 365 model. It actually is there, like from a perspective of dealing with this every day. We are definitely cognizant that it's all there. Business Central is a great product. It actually operates on the Navision platform, so it's very similar, but it is in the cloud and it does stay up to date. You don't have to worry about these irregular upgrades. They did dump payroll out of all of that, so there is no payroll module in Business Central, but there's some great ISVs that you can add payroll into, and it integrates into some of the bigger stuff. ADP being the largest. So if you want to use ADP for your payroll and do a journal entry into Business Central, that's all available. So.
Wow. So, Keith, our friend from SoCal, right? He said, having a development staff and professional services to me is the secret sauce to moving beyond commodity-based MSP pricing. He said, developing site-specific solutions, integrating systems. Sorry, Pete. Pete. I see Pete on the line. Developing site-specific solutions, integrating systems to facilitate best of breed, makes you sticky and prevents pricing fights with other MSPs. I don't think we're going to disagree with you, Keith. I thought and hey, you talk to a lot of people, Zach. I talk to a lot of people. Pete's on the line from Equilibrium. He deals with a lot of MSPs, comes from that world. I mean, we start to see DevOps become pretty, like it's popping up, right? And that's usually because there's a bunch of tools. They don't always do what you want them to do out of the box. And having somebody internally to script and kind of tweak things and fuse things together kind of progresses things. But that's really more for the internal use of the MSP's resources. When you start packaging software development to the end customer, it's a completely different engagement. It really is. I understand why a software company may turn around and say, hey, I'm going to deliver this as a managed service so that you don't have to worry about what's underneath the hood to keep it running. But I find it very hard to go the other direction where you're an MSP doing the plumbing, and now you have to create a whole new language effectively in order to play in that world. And to be honest with you, a lot of scoping changes, a lot of tweaks. It's very documentation heavy. And I feel like MSPs struggle with the MSAs and the SOWs and constantly updating things. I mean, we're again back to NCE, right? People are going back to their customers right now saying, hey, Microsoft's changing their pricing. And they had that originally in their master services agreement. And now they're going back saying, do I still want to push this through? Or do I want these people to go directly to Microsoft so I don't have to deal with it? I mean, that's just one piece. Software development's a lot of pieces that have to come together.
Yeah, my advice to MSPs that are, and first of all, let me address Keith's secret sauce question or secret sauce comment. He is exactly right. As an MSP, my argument is we don't really digitally transform our clients. We help them achieve digital transformation because we maintain stability and security and reliability. Without that, you can't get to that maturity level of digital transformation. But let's be honest, most MSPs aren't transforming an organization from a digital perspective, because that takes implementing software, that takes building business processes. And there's definitely MSPs that are getting into that, and I commend them all. But I would say a lot of times our role as MSPs is to keep things running. That's core one. When you move into the software development and the software consulting arena, you all of a sudden revolve around business process, and you revolve around getting people moving their softwares and their life and everything they do at the business into technology. And it's a very different approach. It's very, very different to approach it from that direction. And like you mentioned, the scope changes are constant. I've oftentimes seen like what a developer hears and what a customer says, and then you look at the images together and they're two totally different images, right? You have to weigh all of that, and it's an extremely collaborative approach. And in IT, we have projects, but a lot of times our projects, even complicated ones, can be done in a month or less, right? They're very quick. Software consulting, we'll have projects that go on a year. We'll have projects that go on 6 months. A really short one is 3 months. So it's a very different world. Now, where True North actually came from and why we spun True North out is what we learned in 3 years and just about bankrupted our company doing it, is we learned that a managed service company is probably not going to make this leap. Like, first of all, I would not be the one to advise you to make the leap. Unless you are a highly mature MSP, you've got cash flowing hand over fist, and you're just trying to figure out where to put it. I would not recommend getting into this. If you're struggling with the whirlwind of running an MSP, which we definitely have experienced there, I mean, there's a lot of variables in MSP. We run a complicated business, and it requires constant oversight. You all of a sudden take your eye off the ball and you start having this software consulting firm, which is a whole different business model. It's tough. It's really tough. And I'm happy to say we survived it and we learned a lot. But when we launched True North, we launched it with the idea that we wanted to be able to help the MSP community bring digital transformation to their clients with the Dynamics products. But we wanted to help them do it without having to bring in that to themselves, because it takes 5 hires. So you got to have a solution architect. You got to have a technical consultant, a functional consultant, an account manager, and you have to have a salesman or salesperson for that business.
Wow. That's the smallest footprint of that.
It's the smallest footprint. Yep.
So let me go backwards for a second. And Keith's a big proponent of this. I'm not trying to make him feel good about himself. He already is. I'm going to throw this out there. Technology does a lot of things, and there's no one road, right? It does, like, you can take a lot of different routes to try and get your outcome. I think the struggle is that a lot of technology people, and Zac, you've been on both sides of this, right? Mm-hmm. They struggle with the business process and understanding the organization first so that they can figure out where they're trying to go and what needs to be done to get there. And like, technology is a tool to help that. But like, quite frankly, there are failures when you try and roll out a new ERP system, a new CRM system, a new, basically a business operating system, because the people who are trying to implement it just don't understand the business itself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's the truth. You know, that's what I would say is a big difference about IT and software consulting is in IT, we can prescribe kind of a method, and that prescription really, it goes across all industries. My favorite thing when selling IT is like your prospect will say something like, well, how many of this industry do you have as a customer? Because they somehow think that if you're in education and you have other education customers, you're going to be magically better at it. Well, the reality, and we all know this as MSPs, is most businesses are generally the same when it comes to IT. Mm-hmm. Software consulting, every single business is different. And I don't know the percentage, but a huge amount of the consulting is actually us understanding how their business works, and sometimes understanding it even more intimately than the customer even understands their own business, because we're connecting dots and software and pieces. And in that, we have to understand how the business works, and then we have to understand where they're going. And the consulting is bridging that through the whole time. So it's highly complex. And yeah, they spend a lot of money just teaching us how their business works.
I agree. So quick question from Keith himself says, do you T&M your services, or do you wrap them into a service included in a lease?
Oh, great question. So that's the trouble with consulting as well, is a lot of times it is just project dollars. So what we do, one thing we discovered that works extremely well is the first engagement with a client is you've got the prospect, you've got the solution architect, and the salesperson. And what we do is we basically find out what's the company objectives, and we give them a ballpark. We just say, hey, this is a $50,000 project. Well, if the client says, okay, I can live with $50,000, Then we proceed to a blueprinting step. And that blueprint is really trying to understand what the client's objectives are and giving them enough documentation. I don't know if it's quite this great, but this is what we kind of say they get to, is they could take our blueprint and they could go implement with a competitor. Now, I've never had that happen, so I can't say we've tested it, but we get, for it's a paid engagement. So like on a $50,000 project, maybe it's $5,000, maybe it's $10,000, but they get a document that is essentially a blueprint on how that will be built. The
Wow,
remainder of the,
I was gonna say, talk about the free network assessment. That's not free.
no, that does not happen. That's another thing, is you will go out of business giving away free blueprint solutions in this business. Now, I will say our close ratio is amazing. A lot of times if customers will buy the blueprint, it's an 80% or more close ratio. And the other 20% doesn't go to competition. They just don't do anything, right? They stay where they're at. So what it does is it does two things. It filters out the prospects to make sure we got the serious ones versus the non-serious. The other part is we get paid for what we do, which is really helpful because, again, payroll is our largest expense. But the other part is it really clarifies what you talked about, George, the business processes versus the the typical standard software implementations. And then out of that, of course, we're also figuring out what licensing, because if anybody thought Microsoft licensing was complicated before, go out to Dynamics and look at all the products. I don't know how many SKUs there are, but it's almost as daunting as Azure.
Oh, yeah. So let me pop in a few. So Pete comes in and says, a practice group in the ERP and accounting world, very different skill sets in IT. 100% Pete. I would think more where you live, Pete, in the marketing and that world is probably more similar with projects and that kind of stuff than IT. And then Keith comes back and says, you must be an expert in Sigma 6 documentation as well as business process, so you can such as lean and flow. Listen, I'm sure there's all sorts of ways to do this, but like obviously to create a professional blueprint, like if I'm going to go build a house on something, I'm not just going to go to some dude on the corner. Like you need to be an engineer. I need to be able to hand it to somebody to get a permit. Like it needs to make sense, right? So if you're just going to back into this, probably not going to work out well. Like you need to actually know what's going on if you're going to be anywhere successful, or else you just never successfully deploy a project, and then that doesn't end well, I don't think.
Exactly.
Let me go into this then, Zach, because I run into many people, right? Like imagine a guy that started off on QuickBooks.
Yeah.
Then they went to QuickBooks Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of hit the limit of QuickBooks Enterprise. And now they're looking at, do I go Salesforce? Do I go NetSuite? Do I do Microsoft's version of that? Whatever. And of course, like these guys are still fairly small businesses, right? They're not, $100 million companies. It could be a $5 million company, $10 million company. They don't really like when they engage a salesperson for direct sales at any one of these companies, they're just being sold a shell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're like, can it happen? Sure, it's possible. But by the way, you need these 5 things that we don't even sell you from somebody outside in order to come together and get you where you're trying to go. And then like Salesforce is one of, they're the big man on the block. Yep. I can't tell you how many times somebody, Salesforce wants all their money up front for the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
They put that big investment into Salesforce subscription, and like they literally don't know how to set it up.
Yeah.
Like they almost need to then go out and hire a Salesforce expert or administrator just to get it working.
Mm-hmm.
So like this is not a small thing.
Not at all. That's exactly what it typically looks like for us. Dollars for dollars, if you're comparing QuickBooks Enterprise to Business Central, licensing costs are about the same when you get to that level. We're talking $80 to $100 a month per license. And most $5 million companies aren't going to have more than 5 or 6 users that need the software. So we're not talking a large monthly spend, right? $500-$600 maybe for a smaller implementation for just licensing. But the implementation on something like that may be $50,000 or $100,000. So it can be a very big thing. And then talking about the products, like Business Central would be a direct NetSuite competitor. Dynamics CE or customer experience, used to be called CRM, would be a direct Salesforce competitor. And what we're seeing is actually not just the power of them separately, because they definitely offset those products separately, but combined, when you put your sales data and your financial data together, the power that you get out of it is huge. And so that's been kind of the big area that we see a lot of growth.
So Keith comes, he's very topical today. He said, I I have told you the best way to do this is to bill up front for all of the development and implementation, then retain ownership of all of the code, and over time, effectively lease the entire system back to the customer. Now, again, this is a business methodology. I'm not saying good or bad or right or wrong. Where do you fall into this business modeling conversations at?
Yeah. So today, most of our business is actually done as work for hire, project for hire. There's definitely a lot of code we can reuse, and we do retain all the ownership of the code. We have some non-competes in there, so obviously we don't write a software for one company and then go give their secret sauce away to a bunch of other companies. But yeah, right now most of our stuff is written just per project. It's highly customizable, so there's not a ton of stuff that can be recyclable. We are finding certain areas, though, private equity being one of them. A lot of these private equity companies, they're either buying up a bunch of MSPs or they're buying up a bunch of HVAC companies. There's some reusable stuff there that can be reused. And of course, then the dollars for hours exchange becomes much better because we're able to bill $10,000 for something that maybe we have $4,000 a man hours in. That's a pretty profitable engagement. We're also starting to bill out some more of the managed service concepts where we have maybe some IP or we have some monthly upgrade and maintenance policies built in, but we don't have a lot of exactly the way Keith describes it, partially just because you've got to find that magic customer that's willing to pay for all the development up front, and we just haven't been so lucky yet. So
Okay, so I'm an MSP. I come to True North and say, I got a prospect that's looking at some of these competitive products. Is this something we can work together on? I'm sure there's some sort of program around this because you're helping MSPs, which is great.
Yep.
And then like when it comes to the conversation of Microsoft licensing, they're like, well, I'm a Microsoft partner. Can I just put it through my relationship? And then you're like, well, sometimes you need permission in order to do some of this, and if you're not certified under Microsoft's program, you're not even able to offer that. How does that work?
Yeah, so we actually accommodate both scenarios. So, and I would say usually it does revolve around your partner level. So if you're able to have dynamic SKUs on your CSP, absolutely, we can do that. We can set it up with you. We just ask that we're made delegate admin because when we do support, we're going to need direct access to everything you would need access to do work with. But that's pretty easy. So a lot of times when we're working with MSPs, that comes up quite frequently. And the answer we usually give them is, if you can buy the Dynamics licensing, let's do it that way. If you can't, it's not worth going out of your way to become Dynamics certified to do it, or whatever you have to do in your partner program. Yeah. Then what we do as part of our partner program is we give back some of that revenue. Of course, we have to keep some of it because we're a business. We have to maintain some of that to do the transfer. But ultimately, our partner program working with MSPs allows you to either keep the licensing or get a cut of that revenue.
And so is there still any premise-based stuff at this point, or is it all subscription cloud now?
As far as our partner program and what we're doing with MSPs, it's all cloud. It's all CSP. If you have a client that has GP right now, we can definitely help them with their consulting. Maybe they're an orphan client where they don't have a good partner to take care of them. Maybe they're not happy with their partner. We can do that. The trouble is they only allow, as far as I'm aware of, only one partner of record there. So that has to be set to Trueit for us to be able to gain the accesses we need and those type of things. However, that's a great time to start that conversation. You're already talking about your clients to go from on-prem to the cloud. If they're sitting on the last servers, that GP server, introduce them to True North, bring us in as a partner, get set up on our partner program, and let's work on them over the next year or two to get them to the cloud. Because as of October of 2021, no new GP licenses were allowed to be sold to new customers. So you can only add to what you have. You cannot become a new GP customer. That said, I think the whole year prior, we sold 2 customers GP. So it's not like it was a growing area either, but Microsoft is actively working to get rid of that on-premise thought. So
interesting. Pete pipes in and says, what does the best partner look like for somebody like you?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So the best partner, Pete, is really an MSP that, like many MSPs, cares deeply for their clients, wants to take all those recurring problems that come with being on-premise, being a second vendor. Vendor management is probably our number 2 problem we deal with, right? And there's always that blame game. What I've found with a lot of software consulting firms is I don't want to say they don't care about MSPs, but they're kind of apathetic to MSPs, right? They don't care which MSP you use. So as your client's MSP, do you want a Dynamics partner that has been an MSP, cares about MSPs, and wants you to maintain that relationship? Or do you want a third-party apathetic Dynamics partner delivering that service, and the day that server goes down, they point the finger at you? And no, you don't want it. You want a partner like the whole mission behind True North is to launch an MSP-friendly software consulting firm. You want a partner like us that we can go together to the client and deliver that mission. So somebody that believes in the cloud is probably number one. An MSP that cares deeply about their clients and wants their clients to have a very talented partner that will be aligned with their MSP, number two. And then the number three is you got to have those clients that are kind of on the larger end of your scale. They're spending the money. They're used to large dollar amounts. Manufacturing is great because they have large capital spend. Independent financial is great. Independent medical is great. We've been seeing a lot of private equity. Those are all great candidates to take a look at organizations moving to Dynamics and to side saddle with True North, so that you're going together with experts that are willing to reinforce your MSP. Because we don't want to be your competition. Yes, I happen to run an MSP over here, but I am not attempting to compete with you. I'm attempting to get that True North business side saddle with you and help you keep your clients and keep them excited.
So a little side banter on the way, right? We got Dallas fan and Ken and Pete's giving them a hard time, as usual, right? We love NFL here. So let's rewind for a second.
Yeah.
For somebody who's never dealt with anything with the word Business Central or Microsoft Dynamics, if you were to just sum up what this whole suite of Microsoft products do, and what size customer, you said on the larger side. So what size customer would be, somebody who, is it somebody who's already on a NetSuite or Salesforce? Is it somebody, like I gave my example earlier, start on QuickBooks, now on QuickBooks Enterprise, and now have outgrown it? Like what's available and what's the right size?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I use these statistics loosely, but I typically say the average MSP is going to have 5 to 10% of their customers that qualify. It's that upper echelon of customers we have. It's the customers you have that you partner with the closest. We don't see a lot of conversions from NetSuite to Business Central or Salesforce to customer experience. But what we do see is at that inflection point where they're contemplating, right? So they're contemplating, do I go from, I've outgrown QuickBooks Enterprise, or I've outgrown GP, or not outgrown GP, but you just want to get off of the on-prem concept. That's the inflection point where Dynamics comes in. The other thing that we see is when a customer is choosing to go that direction, the reason MSPs are a lot of times more peaked to go Dynamics is because it's a Microsoft stack, right? We are Microsoft MSPs a lot of the times. Our whole world revolves around Microsoft. Now, I realize there's some of us that do some Google and some AWS, but probably none of us that do NetSuite or Salesforce. They're probably those third parties that we struggle with. Well, the Dynamics 365, the whole stack operates like Microsoft programs. So from an MSP standpoint, it's really easy to tie into Active Directory and Azure. It's really easy to connect Azure data lakes and things like that back to the accounting. It cross-platforms everything and it's built in. If your customer goes out and gets NetSuite, that's an integration that'll have to be written. If your customer goes out and gets Salesforce, that's an integration you're going to have to deal with. None of us that do Teams want our customers to have Slack, right? Why? Because it doesn't tie in, Now, nothing against those products, but there is a seamless integration between the Dynamics stack and the 365 stack, the O365 stack.
Interesting. So, have you run into MSPs large enough to adopt these softwares internally?
Oh, yeah.
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 How big? At what point did they say QuickBooks is in our rearview mirror, we're going to GP?
Yeah. So first of all, there's several MSPs out there that we've ran into that use GP, and that's a great example to take a look at Business Central. There's also some of those situations where you've hit the limits of QuickBooks. Maybe QuickBooks just isn't cutting it for you anymore. The reporting isn't there, the flexibility. A great example, George, is multi-entity. So if you have a situation where you have 3 companies that kind of roll up to one, and so an expense comes in and needs to be allocated percentage based to all 3, that's really difficult to do in accounting systems that aren't designed for it. So a lot of times what's happening is an accountant is dividing that expense into 3 different buckets and then dropping it in as a journal entry. Well, Dynamics does that automatically for you. It's a program called Dimensions built into Business Central. You say this resource is 30% here, 25% here, and the remainder here, and boom, it just does it. That's a great thing that we're seeing. We're also seeing a lot of roll-ups with private equity that are buying multiple MSPs. And one of the challenges they're having is, okay, so now I have 20 MSPs under one private equity firm. How in the world do I get all the financials to line up? Because one group's on QuickBooks, another group's on Peachtree. Maybe we got a straggler out there on GP. Maybe we have another one that's spreadsheets yet. I haven't seen that yet, but that could be, you know. So how do you take all that and roll it up to a consistent financial system? And Business Central is perfect for that. Well, if it happens on MSPs, it can happen on everything else. We have another large HVAC private equity. They have 70 or 80 different situations where they need the financials, and the other thing is the CRM. They need the CRM to all tie back, right? Because it is the parent company's customers is all this, the sum of the parts. They need a way to collaborate all of that together.
Wow. So, okay. What if somebody comes to you and says, why shouldn't I go with HubSpot versus like a Dynamics, instead of CRM, customer experience, new brand name?
Yeah.
But like HubSpot seems a lot easier out of the gate. There's maybe not as much work in order to get it to do what you want it to do. And like, I get Microsoft's, the big guy on the block, but it seems like there's a lot more work involved.
Yeah. So what I would say is, from a CRM standpoint, HubSpot is amazing. In fact, what's hilarious to me is CRM, Microsoft Customer Experience, has an integration to HubSpot because so when you're looking at Microsoft Customer Experience, you're not really buying your typical CRM. You're buying more like what we're used to in Salesforce. You're buying a business operation tool. Mm-hmm. So in HubSpot, if you're just tracking contacts, emails, and when you called people, stick with HubSpot. It's not only is it cheaper, but you probably out of the box can use it. Whereas with CE though, you can run, so some of the projects we've done on CE that are kind of neat is we built a software for the Ronald McDonald House International, or excuse me, not international, we built it for a location. Ronald McDonald House is run a lot like a hotel, where you've got people staying with you that have kids in the hospital. And really, for all intents and purposes, aside from, there is even some billing portion because they pay a small portion of the expense if they're able to afford it. They're like running a hotel. But they also have donor management they have to manage. They also have reimbursements from insurers they have to manage. There is so many other pieces that a typical hotel software cannot do. So we took Microsoft CE and we built it out to do all of that. You can't do that with HubSpot. That's not possible. So it's thinking about business operations is where you bring in a CE or a Salesforce or something like that. HubSpot is a great CRM. And if you need a CRM and you're not looking for complexity, go buy HubSpot. But if you need a CRM that does stuff far beyond what HubSpot will do, now the sky is the limit with CE.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So I think Microsoft themselves came out at one of their most recent virtual conferences and said that they plan to offer CE as some sort of contact center type solution. I don't know how far along that is, but there's a lot of software out there that does that, and I guess they're trying to like stream multiple products together underneath of that umbrella.
Yeah, keeping up with the SKUs for the Dynamics suite is a full-time job. It's they've got all kinds of stuff. Contact center, they've got marketing platforms in there like automated marketing. They've got so many different items that really, take your constant contacts, take your click dimensions, take all these different programs, and Microsoft has got answers to it, just more and more of that every month. And so, yeah, really, the sky's the limit. What's neat about the Dynamics family is that if you choose to go down Dynamics route, you could stay on Dynamics for the rest of your business life. And that's kind of nice. Is just like, I don't mean to keep giving credence so much to NetSuite and Salesforce, but they're behemoths in the market. Just like when you finally go to NetSuite, you don't ever really have to move. An unknown fact around the world, because Microsoft isn't great at advertising, is the Dynamics family is very much like that. It is probably the last decision when it comes to accounting and CRM you'll ever have to make. you'll be able to run your business to hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars, and not change the family you work with. So
Wow. So this is meant to go from like on the bottom end of mid-market, like
Mhm.
hey, you're coming out of small business land, you're actually, growing, you get to this kind of glass ceiling with all of the small business products. And then so that's where you would hook into Dynamics world, it sounds like. And then
Yeah.
from there, it's how big can you grow?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The nice part is too, is it's not a gigantic leap like PeopleSoft or ServiceNow. Those ones, when you start moving into those, I mean, those can be $1 million implementations out of the gate. Now, Dynamics does have that. They have, if everybody's familiar with AX, or now it's called Finance and Operations, Business Central Finance and Operations. That is, you're going to pay $1 million to implement one of those. We don't do that. That's not where we're at yet. We pretty much would work with companies that would be either GP, Navision, potentially in some cases the SL size customers, even though that's more European. Those type of sizes are areas that we can work in all day. And that takes you well up the mid-market stack and sometimes even the bottom of enterprise. So.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. Like the naming conventions change, but you're right. GPs, they've heard of it at least, right? It's
Yeah.
been out there for a long time. It'd be interesting to see how much more, like, do you envision Microsoft trying to take a piece of this and try and bring it downstream to the smaller business? It kind of feels like that's
Yeah.
their direction on a lot of things.
I sense they're trying to, but like anything Microsoft, none of us can give them credit for not being complicated. Microsoft is really complicated. So I sense that they're constantly trying to bring that down to be more of a QuickBooks killer, if you will. Nothing against QuickBooks, but trying to compete at that level, because QuickBooks has a very large part of the market share. The trouble with that right now is it's just the implementation, the price point licensing to licensing might be getting close, but the implementation costs are just not flip of a switch. You can't buy Business Central out of the package and just be running with it, unless you're really willing to invest some time and you've got a CFO or accountant that really has some experience.
Yeah, Pete pops in and says, I thought Microsoft had a small business package years ago, but then like abandoned it. It was supposed to compete against QuickBooks and Peachtree.
Yep, I remember that. We implemented one or two of those things well as an MSP, well before we had any ideas to go software consulting. It was actually a pretty good product. I think it was called Small Business Accounting, if I remember right. And it was a solid product. It would have been a good QuickBooks and Peachtree killer. But the unfortunate part was Microsoft just didn't invest anything in the marketing. If Microsoft took the oomph they put into Surface and the NFL and all of that, and they put that into Dynamics, I think 10 years from now, Dynamics market share would be off the charts, but unfortunately, they just didn't invest anything into it and they dropped it off.
Well, I mean, Tom Brady probably was the best marketing for Surface, right? He broke it, he threw it. Everyone said, "Hey,
Right.
Tom, you need another Surface?"
That's right. Now, if we could figure out how we could break software on national television, it'd be perfect.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Pete said, yeah, when I started my company, they gave it away for free back then. Well, you
Yep.
gotta start somewhere, right? The freemium model is where a lot of these guys go. So big picture zooming out, right? If you have a larger customer, I don't know if it's a number or a head counting, Zach, I don't know. It's, hey, 50 million or above in revenue, or I don't know what the magic number is where it makes sense. But if you have a larger customer and they're coming to you and they're saying, hey, we're looking at solutions. Do you know anything about CRMs? Do you know anything like, that's probably the time where they hit the help button and maybe raise their hand and say, hey, can you guys help me out?
Yeah, I would say it's hard to boil down size-wise because sometimes people count is really low, but multi-entity and complexity is always the things that I would say would drive that. And then of course you got to kind of smell test them off of the idea of amount of implementation dollars. If $50,000 is going to make them like freak out, okay, they're probably not used to it. But manufacturing, they spend millions of dollars all the time. Trucking and logistics spends millions of dollars all the time. It's not the capital spend that scares them. So usually it's the complexity. You got an organization that has an LLC that owns the property. You got an organization that has an LLC that owns the vehicles or the equipment. When you start to have multi-entity, that ratchets up the need for better accounting. And then what I would say on the CRM side is when you start to have an entity that needs to connect business processes from sales to operations to finance. Those are very difficult without the high quality tools like Microsoft CE. So
fair enough. Now, so I feel like, and if I'm going in an area that I shouldn't, stop me, but I feel like there's been this constant urge for somebody to reinvent the operating system that MSPs run on.
Oh, you hit a hot button for us.
I just feel like every time I turn around, they're like, "Oh, I'm building my own," and I'm like, "I thought we got off of building your own, and now you're going back to this." Like, where are you trying to go here? And then I was like, some people, like, I remember back in the day, there was like an Australian company that tried to create all these plugins for Dynamic CRM so that they could try and make it into like, a PSA for IT companies, and then like disappeared, right? And I was like, oh, I wonder what happened to that guy. Like, it's almost like a roller coaster. It comes, it goes, it comes, it goes. Do you? There's a lot of customization that's required to make something, as big as a Salesforce or Dynamics or whatever to work in that way. I'm not sure I would recommend people try and go do that on their own.
Definitely not on your own. So there's a large amount of, I don't know if you'd call it discontent or if you just call it lack of attention in the PSA market, and you're sensing that, right? We're getting a lot of these new companies, whether it be Synchro or Super AI, Super Ops AI. You're starting to see a lot of these
one every year and a half pops up.
Exactly. And so it is my dream that someday we'd be able to build a Dynamics PSA, and then coupling with Intune, you could almost have a Dynamics RMM. But the trouble is that's really expensive and that takes a lot of capital. So I will say that we're going to start by where we're at personally is True North is fully operating as a PSA within Dynamics. Now that said, it doesn't have all the customizations that we can package this up and just hand it out to you, but we're doing our billing out of it. We're doing our scheduling out of it. We're tracking projects and doing all that stuff. It's not perfect. And we're a ConnectWise shop. So we still have ConnectWise for our MSP. We still have ConnectWise for other things within True North. But it is our dream that someday we'd be able to say everything runs in Dynamics. And we've had a surprising number of MSPs reach out to us and say, could this replace XYZ PSA? As much as I'd love to say yes, I would say that takes several $1 million, and I'm just shy a little bit of that in our bank account and the risk, So, but what we're doing is behind the scenes, we're trying to generate buzz for some sort of investment around this. We would be very open to that idea. So if anybody out there listening's got a few $1 million, wants to realize this vision,
I think that's Keith.
Yeah, there you go, Keith. Let's do it. So, but I think it would be. There's several large MSPs that have come to me and said, "Can we do this?" Well, you can. The answer is yes, but unlimited money, unlimited time, and then also, dig through your PSA once and look at all those different integrations, and that's really a big piece too. You got your break gauges and your IT glues and your connect boosters, and you can tack on every integration. Well, that takes time. That takes time. So Keith.
You see what Pete said? I spent it all on my new koi ponds.
Bummer, Keith. We were so close. If you hadn't pulled the trigger on the koi pond, we'd have PSA.
I would say it's because you're going to all those Cowboy games, but I see that you don't really go to the games, Keith. You watch them from home, buddy. Probably a good business investment there. I'm just going to be honest. So how do people engage, right? Like, how do they get a hold of your people? How do they say, I have a potential opportunity? Like, how do they, like, what does the partnership, kind of thing look like? What's the story?
Yeah. So thank you for asking that. So you go out to, first step is go to truenorthdynamics.com. So it's true without the E. So TRU dynamics.com. One funny story, George, when we were spinning this off, one of the reasons to spin it out was I wanted to make sure everybody knew we weren't going to be competition. We weren't going to be another MSP that was working. So I had one rule: whatever name we come up with, it can't have any connection to Trueit. The marketing company we engaged brought this idea of True North Dynamics. We all fell in love with it, being Fargo, being True North, north of the. So sorry about that. It sounds like Trueit, but I promise you they're not linked. So you go out to truenorthdynamics.com. Right on the homepage, you can get started with being a partner, and you can fill out that form. We'll get one of our partner managers to get a hold of you, explain the partner program. We make it super simple. You just sign your typical MSA, NDA type stuff. We sign a non-compete with you. I literally can't access those systems as far as the True North stuff. So I have no idea what's in there without, working with my True North team. So we keep it so separate. None of our MSP has any idea what's over there. So what we do is then we get you set up on our partner program. We talk about how you want to deal with licensing. We talk about how we engage with partners. We don't white label this. Part of it is there's just so much hand in glove working with the client. White labeling is not possible.
Don't white label Microsoft, man.
No, it's really hard. So your client will know they're engaging with True North Dynamics, but we are strictly there as the software consulting partner, and we're always reinforcing you as the MSP. And then with that, you get a rev share. So we make it so that you get rev share on all the service revenue. You'll get a kickback. If we put any maintenance programs in place, you get a kickback. And then, of course, with the licensing, you either get a kickback or you just keep it under your CSP, whichever works for you. We assign an account manager for you so that they're engaging with you and helping you work through which clients are good fits for me, which clients aren't a good fit. We talk about how the blueprinting process works, so you're fully comfortable with that. And then typically speaking, we bill your client direct, so we insulate you from the liability of what happens if the client has some expectation misalignment on a project. Do I have to deal with collections? No, you don't. Your client pays us. We give you the kickback in a rebate type form, so you're not having to worry about holding a $50,000 liability on an implementation. So works really nice that way.
See, sun's been coming at me all day, man.
Yeah, you got
it's like, don't come to Fargo, stay in Philly, right? So TrueNorthDynamics.com, true without an E, right?
Yep.
Have a conversation. It costs you nothing. It sounds like the whole program is designed to help you out. If you're looking about accounting, ERP, CRM, just do a little bit of Googling around Microsoft Dynamics to see what the whole stack offers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you're already a Microsoft CSP, which most of you probably are, there's 1,000 certifications to go and get. This doesn't sound like it's one that you should be spending a lot of time on unless this is the business that you're going into. Exactly. So this is where partnering makes a lot more sense than trying to go out there and do it all by yourself. Because I think we've all learned that doesn't work. And I think at the end of the day, concentrate on what you do best, make where you can, partner where you can. That's the best way to do it. We may see Zac and team on the road this year.
Yeah.
As we're traveling through America. Or if you really like the snow and we want to head out to Fargo, this guy will absolutely pick you up from the airport, I think.
Absolutely. The other thing too, I forgot to mention this, George, but we'll see you on the road at Exchange fall and spring. So we'll be out at those shows this year. We decided to make an investment in those. They've been really good for us from a learning perspective as an MSP.
So when you say fall, spring, that there's one right around the corner
in March or February, right? March. Yeah. Yep. So we'll see you at the end of February at CRN Exchange. We will also see you at Next Gen in October. And we're going to be at IT Nation in November too. So we're gonna do 4 conferences this year. Would love to see you out there, answer any questions you have about getting on Dynamics, and of course, love to talk shop about being an MSP. So
I'm gonna either find a curtain or some sunglasses. So next time I'll be good to go. So Zac, really appreciate you for coming on. Can't wait to see you guys out on the road. Stay warm. And I'm sure you'll find a way to get out of Fargo like you are going to do in February. For everyone else, we hope we see you on the road soon. Don't forget about Florida. Oh, I forgot to mention Nerdio's conference. If you're still interested in taking a sunny vacation out of the country in Cancun, they're still accepting people to go to Cancun. If that's something you're willing to do, check out nerdiocon.com. Everyone else, we appreciate you for jumping in. This session was recorded. We post on MSPinitiative.com and under your favorite podcatcher. Zac, catch you on the flip side, my friend.
Thank you so much, George, and everybody out there. Appreciate it.
You got it. Have a good one.